I said I needed time, he took forever. Funny, I say that to myself, though he's not here. Yet. I'm leaning against the chipped counter of the bookstore, scanning the new arrivals without really reading, because it's her voice I'm replaying in my head. She appeared around the corner, mid-40s, hair loosely pinned, sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal a faint scar on her wrist. She moves like she owns the space, but there's a carefulness in her steps, a rhythm she doesn't bother to explain. I'd never noticed how easy it is to get lost in the small details of someone, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, or how her eyes lingered on the spine of an old poetry collection like it held a secret. I wasn't expecting anyone today, she said, not looking at me. Her voice was low, but it carried, almost teasing. I shrugged, pretending to be casual, though my chest was tight. Yeah, me neither. There was a beat, the kind that stretches too long, the kind that smells of warm coffee and paper dust. She stacked a few books with slow, precise movements, and I realized my hand had curled around a paperback, gripping it tighter than necessary. I couldn't tell if she noticed, but the air shifted, like the moment itself had weight. She glanced up, caught me staring for a fraction too long, then smiled, not indulgent, not knowing, but like she had just remembered something that amused her, and it had nothing to do with me. I wanted to ask what, but the words lodged in my throat. So I nodded instead, a little too eagerly. You like this author? She asked, tilting her head toward the book in my hand. I shook it off like it was nothing. Yeah. Something about the way he sees people, I guess. Her eyes flickered, a quick, almost imperceptible look that seemed to weigh my answer. Then she leaned back on the counter, the movement deliberate, and for the first time, our shoulders brushed. Not much, really, but it was enough. Enough to make the air between us feel slightly charged, like static before a storm. I wanted to say something smart, something memorable, but my brain was empty except for that moment. Her hand moved over the counter as she reached for a notebook, and she paused mid-motion, fingers hovering. Something in the hesitation pulled at me, a quiet signal I couldn't read. I cleared my throat, trying to pretend I wasn't thinking about how graceful she looked even while doing the simplest things. The pause stretched. She sighed softly, and I thought that sigh, just that sigh, could ruin me if I let it. Then she walked away, not hurried, not like she was avoiding me, but leaving just enough space to make me want to follow. And I didn't. I stayed, staring at the counter, my fingers brushing the spine of the book again, wondering why I couldn't stop noticing her, wondering if this was the start of something I wasn't supposed to understand yet. Her laugh drifted back to me from the far aisle, soft, unforced, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. It lingered in the corners of the room, a sound that belonged nowhere but here, now, and it hit me, I wasn't going to forget it. I couldn't. And that's when I caught myself, replaying the tiny brush of her shoulder, her hand frozen mid-air, the way she glanced at me without really looking, and I knew I'd be thinking about it all day. I didn't plan to stay late, but there I was, kneeling by the stack of returned books she'd asked me to reorganize. The bookstore smelled faintly of rain on asphalt, the shelves warm under soft lamplight, and I could hear her humming a tune that didn't match anything I recognized, low, careful, almost reluctant. She was behind the counter, cataloging new arrivals with a precision that suggested she'd been doing it for years. Her hands moved quickly, but now and then they trembled just slightly, and I caught the hesitation. She brushed it off like it was nothing, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear again. I wanted to reach out, steady her, but I froze. You don't have to, if it's too much, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, and I realized she was talking to herself, or maybe to me. I looked up, surprised. She met my eyes, just briefly, then turned back to the ledger. The faint crease between her brows, the way her shoulders sagged, she was tired, but not just physically. Something else, something she didn't share with anyone. Here, can you? She trailed off, pointing at the corner of the shelf. She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. I bent down, careful not to touch her hand, careful not to make the wrong sound, and passed her the box. Our fingers brushed, fleeting, but enough to send a spark up my arm. She didn't flinch, didn't react, but I could feel her pull back just a fraction. She laughed then, quietly, almost embarrassed, and it sounded like the hum of a fragile instrument. I noticed the small things, the way her eyes softened when she laughed, the faint tremor in her hands, the tension in her jaw. She was hiding something, holding back, and I didn't know if it was trust or fear. You always stay so quiet, she said, glancing at me over her shoulder. It wasn't a complaint, exactly, more like an observation she wasn't sure how to finish. Guess I'm used to it, I said, shrugging, pretending I didn't notice the way she lingered on my words. She didn't respond. She just returned to the ledger, her fingers tracing lines of text like she was afraid to let go. I wanted to reach out again, but I held back. Watching her, noticing her little gestures, was enough to make the air between us taut. Then she sighed, a long, quiet exhale, and for a moment, she seemed to deflate, human, imperfect, vulnerable. I almost said something, anything, but I stayed quiet, letting her ease into the moment without interruption. Finally, she stood, brushing her hands on her apron, and the room felt smaller, warmer. She glanced at me, and our eyes held just a beat too long. I saw the tiredness there, the hidden weight she carried, but also the faint, almost imperceptible spark of curiosity, and maybe permission. Her lips curved, just slightly, a gesture I couldn't read, and my heart caught in my throat. I wanted to ask what she was thinking, wanted to hear her say anything at all, but instead, I just smiled back, quietly, letting the silence stretch. That moment, as small, unspoken, electric, stayed with me long after she returned to her work. I found myself replaying it over and over, her fingers brushing mine, her sigh, that almost smile that said nothing and everything at once. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about it. Rain drummed against the bookstore windows, a steady, insistent rhythm that matched the pulse in my chest. She and I were the last ones there, shelves half-sorted, a small lamp casting long shadows across the floor. I was kneeling to fix a crooked stack of novels when I realized she was watching me. Not openly, just the faint angle of her head, the way her eyes lingered longer than necessary. "Do you always stay this late?" she asked, voice soft, almost lost in the rain. I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to break the tension, didn't want to ruin the small, electric closeness that had settled between us. Instead, I focused on the books, letting my fingers brush against the spines, letting the silence speak. "You never talk about yourself," she added, her words careful, deliberate. I felt the weight of her gaze, heavy and curious. My throat tightened. I wanted to tell her everything, that I notice the way her hands shake when she's tired, that I can't stop thinking about her laugh, that I'd follow her anywhere if she asked. But the words stuck, unspoken, because some line existed that neither of us was ready to cross. Thunder rolled outside, and she flinched just slightly. I moved to close the window, careful to avoid touching her. Our fingers brushed on the sill, just enough to make my stomach flip. She didn't react, but I could see it, that quick intake of breath, the subtle shift in her posture. My chest tightened with the awareness that something almost dangerous, emotionally, maybe more, was stretching between us. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. A name flashed, and I could see her jaw clench ever so slightly. Her ex, maybe. She stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering over the screen, as if deciding whether to answer. She didn't. Not yet. I wanted to ask if she was okay. I wanted to say something to bridge the space, but I stayed still, quiet, letting her handle it. There was a restraint in me now, a conscious holding back. Every instinct screamed at me to step closer, to reach out, to cross that line, but I didn't. Instead, I felt her move past me to the counter, her shoulder brushing mine, light, accidental, yet deliberate enough to make my heart hammer. I kept my gaze down, pretending to organize books, though every nerve in me was tuned to her. She muttered something about finishing the night's ledger, and I nodded, offering a small smile I hoped looked casual. Her eyes met mine briefly, and in that flash, I saw something, maybe longing, maybe hesitation, maybe recognition, before she looked away. I wanted to say her name, wanted to confess what I didn't even fully understand yet. Instead, I just inhaled, exhaled, and stayed kneeling. She moved closer to the lamp, and the light caught the curve of her face, the faint shadow under her eyes, the small tension in her shoulders. I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to anchor her somehow. My hand lifted just an inch, before I stopped myself, dropping it back to the books like nothing had happened. And that was it. Almost, nearly, but not quite. A storm raged outside, a storm I couldn't let break the quiet tension between us. Yet even as she returned to the ledger, I knew I'd replay the brush of her shoulder and the pull in her glance for hours, wondering if next time I might not hold back. We're building this so that each near action raises tension and deepens emotional stakes. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective outside. Inside, the bookstore smelled of wet paper and old wood, and the lamplight cast shadows on her face that made her look both impossibly calm and impossibly fragile at once. She was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, jaw tight, like she'd been holding something in for hours. I didn't know whether to speak first, or wait, or run, but I stayed, kneeling by a stack of novels, pretending to sort them. Finally, she sighed, the sound low and steady, and it felt like it filled the room. "Do you ever think about why we keep doing this?" she asked, voice quieter than I expected. I froze. "Doing what?" "This," she said, gesturing vaguely between us, the lingering glances, the small hesitations, the moments where we almost said more than we should. "This pretending it's normal. That it's fine." Her words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to tell her I thought about it constantly, that it consumed me more than I should admit, but I stayed quiet. I watched the way her fingers traced the edge of the counter, the way she exhaled in shallow, uneven bursts. She wasn't just tired. She was careful. She was scared. I don't even know if we're supposed to be here," she continued, voice trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. "I keep asking myself why I let this, whatever this is, take up so much space." I swallowed hard, feeling my heart beat so loudly it felt like it could betray me. I wanted to reach out, to hold her hand, to anchor her in the moment, but I stayed still. Instead, I leaned a little closer, just enough for my shoulder to brush hers, though it barely registered. She didn't pull away. She didn't look at me. I wanted to say something, anything that would make sense. "I don't know either," I admitted finally, voice quiet. I notice you. All the time." Her head tilted slightly, almost imperceptibly, but she didn't respond. Her eyes stared past me, at some point on the wall I couldn't see. There was a tension in her jaw, in the slope of her shoulders, that made me ache in ways I couldn't name. "I'm not even sure I can do this," she whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing to myself, or to you." I swallowed again, nodding slowly. I couldn't tell her it was fine. It wasn't. Not in the least. The silence that followed was thick, charged, and almost unbearable. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint rustle of a page, seemed magnified. I wanted to speak, to break it, but I couldn't. Finally, she lifted her eyes to mine. There was a flicker there, pain, hesitation, maybe a question she didn't have words for. "I don't even know if I want to be rescued," she said, voice breaking just enough to make my chest ache. And then she turned, walked to the far corner, and started res-tacking the shelves, leaving me kneeling among books that felt heavier than ever. I stayed frozen, staring at her back, thinking that maybe the worst thing wasn't wanting her, or noticing her, or almost touching her. Maybe the worst thing was realizing I might never have the right words to fix this, or that maybe there were no words at all. The late afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows, catching the golden edges of the bookshelves. She was kneeling by a low stack of novels, picking up one at a time, when she froze. I noticed the way her fingers lingered on the spine, trembled almost imperceptibly, like she'd found something she wasn't ready to confront. "What is it?" I asked, stepping closer, careful not to startle her. She shook her head, exhaling slowly. "It's nothing," she said. But the way she said it, the tightness in her jaw, the pause before she spoke again, told me it wasn't nothing. After a long moment, she finally spoke, voice quiet, almost ashamed. I lost someone. A long time ago. Someone I thought I'd never forget." She paused, running a hand over her hair, fumbling like she wasn't used to saying these things aloud. It changed everything for me. Made me careful. Always careful. I swallowed hard, wanting to reach out, but my hands stayed at my sides. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to break the delicate thread of honesty she'd just woven. "I didn't think about it for years," she continued, almost to herself. "Until now. Until I saw you." Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp but vulnerable. The look made my chest tighten in a way that wasn't new, but somehow it felt heavier, closer, more dangerous. I stepped a little closer, quietly. "You remind me of someone I lost," I said, barely above a whisper. The words came out differently than I expected, not in anger, not in longing, just recognition. She froze, staring at me, not speaking. The silence filled the space between us, thick and unrelenting. Her lips parted, then closed. She shook her head lightly, almost in disbelief, or maybe in denial. "I didn't expect this. I wasn't ready." She swallowed hard, looking down at the book in her hands like it could anchor her. I wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her it was okay, that I wasn't asking for anything she wasn't ready to give. But instead, I just stepped back slightly, letting her have the space she needed. Watching her, noticing her small trembles, her careful posture, made me ache. Every little hesitation, every quiet inhale, spoke volumes I didn't need her to articulate. "You carry it well," I said finally, voice low. "Even when you think you're hiding it." She glanced at me, eyes wet, and for the first time, she let herself linger on me, just a moment, as if she was letting the past and present collide. She didn't speak. She just nodded slowly, and the movement felt almost seismic in its quietness. The book slipped from her fingers, falling with a soft thud to the floor. She didn't bend for it immediately, she just stood there, staring out the window at the fading light. I stayed close, careful, knowing that something had shifted, something I couldn't define yet, but that I could feel in every nerve, in every unspoken word. Her breath hitched softly. She looked back at me, eyes sharp and trembling all at once, and I realized, in that fragile, suspended heartbeat, that whatever had been between us before had changed. Permanently, quietly, but irrevocably. The bookstore smelled of rain and paper, faintly musty, but comforting. We were the only ones left, and the quiet between us was different this time, not heavy, not tense, but still charged. She was perched on the edge of a low shelf, knees drawn slightly up, staring at the floor. I stood nearby, pretending to adjust a stack of books, though my eyes kept drifting to her. "You stayed," she said finally, voice soft, almost a question. I nodded. "I didn't leave." She tilted her head, and for the first time all evening, she let herself meet my gaze fully. No deflection, no half smiles, no careful distance. Just recognition. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sweeping. It was quiet, deliberate, and it felt like everything. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Being here. With you. Without it being complicated. You don't have to, I said, kneeling so I was closer to her level. My hand hovered near hers, careful, almost hesitant. We can just be. Her fingers twitched against the edge of the shelf. I let my hand drift closer, letting our pinkies brush, faint contact, but enough. She didn't pull away. She exhaled softly, letting a little of the tension leave her body. I didn't think I'd let anyone in, she whispered. The words were nearly inaudible, but I caught them. I wanted to respond with something clever or reassuring, but I just stayed there, letting her vulnerability exist without commentary. We didn't need words. The space between us was full of acknowledgement, of shared understanding. Every glance, every small movement, every half-smile said more than a confession ever could. Her hand shifted slightly, brushing against mine more deliberately. I didn't move away. Our fingers intertwined almost by accident, almost by instinct, and I felt the weight of everything, past heartbreak, hesitation, careful walls, melt just enough for this small, quiet connection to settle. She leaned back against the shelf, and I sat down beside her. Not side by side like a scene in a storybook, but close enough that our shoulders touched, close enough that our breathing fell into a subtle rhythm together. I could feel the warmth of her hand against mine, steady, grounding. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence was soft, almost intimate. It carried the weight of everything we'd almost said, almost done, almost feared. And yet, in that silence, there was understanding. There was patience. There was inevitability. She shifted slightly, laying her head lightly against my shoulder, not dramatic, not forced, just there. And I let my cheek rest lightly against the crown of her hair, closing my eyes for a fraction of a second, feeling the steady pulse of life, of presence, of this improbable, earned connection. The rain outside had stopped completely, leaving the world quiet and reflective, but inside, it felt like a pause, a breath held in the knowledge that this moment was real, fragile, and ours. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I let myself settle. Quietly, finally, we existed together. I still remember that first night, the rain tapping against the windows, the small brush of her fingers against mine, the way the bookstore felt impossibly quiet and impossibly alive all at once. Sitting here now, months later, I can feel how much has shifted in her, in me, in the way we move through the world together. She's quieter than she used to be, in the best way. Less guarded, less careful. She laughs more, lets herself linger on small joys, and sometimes, when she's reading something she loves, I catch her staring at me, not with calculation, not with hesitation, but with recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that we survived the almosts, the hesitations, the moments we didn't know how to exist alongside each other. And me? I've learned patience I didn't know I had. I've learned how to notice, how to stay, how to hold space for someone without needing to fill it with words. I notice the tilt of her head when she's thinking, the small tremble in her laugh, the way her fingers brush the edge of a book when she's nervous. I've learned that love isn't a grand confession, a rush, or an inevitable sweep, it's a collection of small, earned moments, layered and fragile, held together by attention and care. Some days, I catch myself just watching her from across the room, smiling at a joke I already know the punchline to, feeling a quiet warmth in my chest that has nothing to do with desire and everything to do with knowing someone so completely, even with all their scars, all their past heartbreak, all the cautious walls they once built around themselves. And she notices me noticing. Not in a self-conscious way, but with a soft acknowledgement, a slight lean toward me in a crowded room, a hand resting a second longer than it needs to on the counter when I pass. Those small gestures, once fleeting and almost accidental, are now deliberate. And I know that I am, too. We don't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. We have the quiet afterglow of understanding, of patience, of moments shared without words. We have a rhythm that's ours alone, a slow, steady beat that tells us we made it through the almosts and came out the other side, not perfect, not flawless, but whole enough to be together. Sometimes I think about how fragile it all felt in the beginning, the hesitation, the stolen glances, the silences that screamed louder than words ever could. And now, here we are, still cautious in some ways, still human, still flawed, and yet, together. Not because it was easy, not because it was supposed to happen, but because we earned it, quietly, one moment at a time. I reach out, fingers brushing hers across the counter, a small smile shared, and I realize, this is love. Not the kind you see in stories or movies, but the kind that lingers, that grows in silence, that survives the almosts, and becomes something you carry with you in every breath. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?